One of the most important parts of the music production process is the mixing and mastering process. And it kind of is the final polishing of your song, and it can either make or break your song, and it can lead you to stand out among other producers if you know how to mix correctly or if you are a skilled mixer. So understandably, a lot of people want to learn how to mix. In this series, the How to Mix series, I'm going to be going over each of the different tools in depth so that you can really understand what is going on when you move certain knobs or when you change parameters within that tool, instead of giving you guys random tips that are out of context or that don't really apply to every situation. I think that is a better way to do it, is to just explain each of the tools so that you can go ahead and make educated decisions on your own. In this video, I'm going to be going over EQs and filters. So it doesn't matter what program you're using because they each have the same functionalities when it comes to these tools. And yeah, go ahead and leave a like if you learned something, and let's get into it. And this whole series is going to be structured assuming that you are a beginner and assuming that you know absolutely nothing, but I will try to get through the information quickly. So if you do know certain things, just know that it wasn't necessarily geared towards you. Kind of see it as review and kind of bear with me, but hopefully I can get this so that it helps all types of producers at all different levels. And yeah. Alright, so as you can tell, I have the EQ down here. It's called EQ8 and I am in Ableton. But like I said before, it doesn't matter what program you are in because all these tools have the same functionality, whether it's in FL Studio, Logic, Cubase, or even any type of third-party plugin. They all have the same functionality, but just a different layout. So if anything, if you can understand how EQ works just from this tutorial, you'll have an even deeper understanding when it comes to using it in your own program. So a common misconception about EQ is that it is some sort of enhancement tool and that it's used to make sounds sound better. That's kind of partially true, but it is not a sound enhancer in the sense that if you have a bad sounding sample or a bad sound, it's not going to make it better. It's not going to make it into a good sound. So let's say you have string sample or instrument sample, like a very cheesy, corny piano sample. EQ, no matter how much you do to the sample, it's not going to turn that sample into a high quality piano sample. So I just wanted to clear that up. It's not a literal enhancement tool for sound. Basically what EQ does is it affects the volume over certain frequencies. Now the easiest way to describe frequencies is it just basically means a range. So if I play this song right here, this kind of middle range sounds are going to be in the middle frequencies, kind of higher pitch sounds. If you listen closely, you can hear a down pitching sound. Higher ones are going to be up here, and then the basses are going to be in the left side in the lower end. So that's frequency. So to kind of demonstrate this further, I have an instrument right here. It's called Operator. It's just one of the Ableton instruments. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and play a sound. I'm going to play a very low wave. Oops. And when I turn up this pitch, you're going to see the frequency move on the EQ. So the higher the frequency, the more to the right the sound is going to be. Okay, that's very high pitched and stuff, but hopefully you get the point. Basses are always going to show up on the left, middle range sounds in the middle, and then high pitch sounds all the way to the right. Instead of using frequencies, you can just use ranges, I guess, like the low range, middle range, and high range. And it's exactly how it sounds. Things that sound high pitched to your ear are going to be on the right, and as it gets lower and lower, it's going to go to the left. Basically, EQ allows you to take a certain frequency band. So as you can tell, this is called EQ8. And there's up to 8 bands, and this band is on a different setting, so I'm gonna set it to all the same. But basically over these different bands you can go ahead and pull them down. Now people just see this and they think, for example, when you go like this it's enhancing the sound, or when you go like this it is muffling it, but they don't it's kind of a vague term to say that it's enhancing it. Really what EQ does is it affects volume. So right here you can see gain. When I pull it up, watch the gain knob down here. The gain knob is going to start to go up, and gain is just synonymous with volume. So with EQ what you're doing is actually pulling up the volume of a certain range of frequencies. Now resonance is another term, or Q. And what that does is that it affects the width of the certain band, and basically that's EQ in a nutshell. It's really just a selective volume editor. Anyways, there are also other features built into the EQ, such as mid-side right here. So right now we're on stereo mode, which means there's just one EQ, and mid-side is just going to split up the EQ into a mono part, a middle, and then the sides are like the panning and the stereo field. So if you have like a very wide sound, the side is going to affect the sides of that sound. So it's just an even more precise way to split the sounds. Now scale affects the amount of gain for each of the edits that you do using the bands. And for example, if right here I have a negative, so right now it's negative 3.75 or 3.8, if I put it to 200%, the gain's actually going to be twice that. So scale is just, it may not even be on every EQ, but that's just something else. All these extra features are just different ways to modify the bands. All these extra things are just extra little parameters, I guess, but now you kind of know what EQ is. It's basically a frequency selective volume editor, and you're probably wondering how that can be useful or in what ways it can be applied. Basically, like I said, EQ is not for enhancing a sound. It doesn't make a sound better, it's just volume. So it would be good for, or it's used for sectioning off sounds to different frequencies. So to demonstrate how EQ could be useful for making space, I have this cymbal, and this is primarily a high pitched kind of sound. You would use this kind of a sound to fill up the higher end. So EQing would be useful, for example, if you have all these lower end sounds down here. Let me go ahead and actually change this to like a low pass kind of thing. So if we enhance these kind of low ends right here, we can hear all this noise down there. And I mean, it's very subtle, but at the same time, when you hear those very, very clear mixes, it means that nothing is, not even the smallest amount of clashing is going on. So in a normal mix, where you would want this cymbal to be, so really it kind of depends on what you want each sound's purpose to be. So for this cymbal, for example, I want it to be in the higher end. I'm not putting in the cymbal to fill in the lower ranges or the lower frequencies. So EQ would be useful for cutting out all that low end and keeping in kind of the main part of the sound that I want. So I decided that I want this cymbal for the higher range of my song. So I'm gonna cut out all the lower end. Let's say right here there's some noise. I could also use EQ very selectively and take that out that way. Obviously the cymbal sounds better by itself when it has all these frequencies. Oops. It sounds better because it's a full sound, but in a song you have to make that sacrifice of certain frequencies in order for it to fit, because the bass is going to be taking up the low end, and the bass, that's the bass's range. So the best solution altogether is to just choose sounds and dedicate them to different ranges before you even do the EQing, because EQing is destructive, as you can tell. And again, when you have a lot of stuff in the same range, as you can tell with the cymbal does sound better with all the frequencies when it plays by itself. But again, in a song, each sound needs to be needs to have its own space. When you try to keep that full cymbal in a song, those frequencies aren't gonna sound good anymore. They're just gonna make a bunch of mud. EQ would allow you to cut that noise out, or filters, which do the same thing, will allow you to cut that noise out completely and only keep the high ranges, and that will make space for other instruments. And that's literally how EQ is used. It's just a volume editor. Filters are basically like EQ bands, except that one end goes to negative infinity, or in certain types of filters it has two different ends that go into negative infinity. So it's just a big hole. For example, in this one, this is called a notch filter, I believe. In Ableton there is a ×4, which means it is going to be 4 times more aggressive than just a regular one. And basically one end goes to negative infinity, which means it's going to cut out the sound completely. To illustrate this further, I wanted to bring in a plugin. So right here we have this low pass filter, and as you can tell, there's 12 dB and there's 24. So if you learned slopes in high school math or in math in general, you know that the larger the number of the slope, the more steep it's going to be. So that's what it means when you see 24 dB. Decibels are just a measure of volume. So the higher that number is, that's the slope of the volume cutoff in a filter, if that makes any sense. So right here, all the frequencies are immediately cut off, whereas if I take a less aggressive one, they're more slowly cut off as it goes downwards. But yeah, EQ is just good for making space. So it's not necessarily something that's used to enhance a sound, like I said. As well, it's sometimes used to emphasize certain frequencies that you want to stand out in a sound. So for example, if you know a certain high-pitched lead is going to be at a 2K frequency, kind of up here, you could start to slowly boost that so that it pops out there and then cut it everywhere else. So places that you cut off, you can make up for it by emphasizing the main part of the sound that you want to stick out. So again, it's mainly for sectioning things off, and hopefully that helped you understand what EQ is. If you did learn something, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with more of these how to mix videos, and as well other videos such as beat making videos and all that.